We all had a terrible fright right now. There was this big booming sound. We sort of all scrambled for the nearest place to hide, and I was hiding behind this wheel. And 141 Field Regiment very kindly provided me this helmet, so I'm still alive.
I had to beg, plead, cajole, fight to be able to report the Kargil war from the front line. NDTV, where I then worked, was worried about my safety. The army was anxious about allowing a female correspondent into an all-male zone. Remember, this was 25 years ago and women were not breaking military barriers in the way that they are doing today. The army understandably said to me, look, this is a war. We can't look after you. I said, I promise you, I do not want any special treatment. They said there are practical problems. There are no bathrooms. There's no assured food. There's no place to sleep. I said, I get it. I understand this is a war. As far as no bathrooms are concerned, I will, I don't know, go in an open field or behind a tree, just like the guys will and the guys do. Anyway, finally, I was able to persuade them and have the honor and the privilege of reporting what I call the most transformative assignment of my life. But so many of you have asked what it was like to be a woman war correspondent. I can tell you this, I was acutely conscious of being female at the war front because I had to fight so hard to get this assignment. I didn't want to say or do anything that could be construed to be girly in cliched terms. You have to remember I was also very young. This was the first war I had ever reported. I didn't know what to expect. I was overwhelmed. And I was very sort of, I guess, subconsciously worried that nobody should ever have an opportunity to judge me for my gender. So let me tell you a little story. I remember this one time when there was a group of soldiers and they quite literally saved our lives. We were, me, my cameraman Ajmal Jami, Gaurav Sawant, who's of course a colleague, and another colleague, Shashi Kumar, and we'd formed this little group. And there was this one evening when, as India pounded the mountain peaks where the Pakistanis were sitting on our territory to get them out, the Pakistan side was counter bombing the national highway on which we were all standing and reporting. And as bombs were raining down, we had nowhere to sort of, to take shelter. And we were in serious danger that evening. And this group of young soldiers, they saved our lives and they gave us shelter in an underground bunker. And we spent the night with them in the underground bunker that evening, that whole night, in fact. Your friends, your colleagues, men on the top.
Yeah, actually before, when you go and face them, it's like a kind of short movie, which runs into your mind, and you see your childhood, your adulthood, and you remember your parents, all your loves and your fears. And then for a fraction of a second you say, no, I've got to overcome it. And then that's the thing that pushes you into the...
It's like your life passes you by in a flash.
Yeah, it's like that.
And the next morning, we all woke up to the great news that Tiger Hill had been recaptured by the Indian Army from the Pakistanis, and that was great news. But then these young men who had saved our lives, they got their orders that they would be the next soldiers to be climbing up the jagged mountain peaks to take the Pakistanis out. And all of us knew that, we may never see these brave soldiers who had just saved our lives. And it was a very emotional moment, in war zones, there is what I call the intimacy of strangers. And my male colleagues, they had tears welling up in their eyes. And my heart was breaking inside, but I felt like if I show my tears, I'm going to be, they're going to say she's crying because she's a girl. And so I sort of, sniffled into my shirt sleeve and I didn't show much emotion, but I took off this little necklace I was wearing and I gave it to the soldiers as good luck. And that's the kind of sort of defensiveness that as a young woman in my 20s, I felt for an assignment that had to really, it didn't easily come my way. I really desperately wanted to be there. When I was in Delhi, I couldn't sleep because I kept thinking I want to be there. And just, it was tough to get the assignment. And so I was very self-conscious as a female reporter. And I guess it was because I was so young. It would be very different today at the age of 52. I got my period while I was at the war front. And, I've already told you there were no bathrooms, and I also ran out of clean clothes because our car got shelled when Pakistan was sort of, bombarding the national highway. Our driver ran away. I lost my knapsack into which I'd carried my clothes. I had to manage with a bottle of water, toilet roll. Kargil toughened me up. It toughened me up not just as a journalist, but it toughened me up as a woman. But I'll tell you this, I'm not India's first woman war correspondent. And you know who that is? That is my mother, Prabha Dutt. Prabha Dutt was a reporter at the Hindustan Times, a chief reporter, in fact, at the Hindustan Times. But when she first applied for a job at the HT, she was told that we don't have mainstream news assignments for women. You can go and cover the city's flower show. She took what was on offer, and she rose to become one of India's best-known investigative reporters. In 1965, that's more than 30 years before the Kargil War, when war broke out between India and Pakistan, she went to her editor, by now having established her credentials, and she said, I want to cover this war. And they said, there's no question of sending a woman to the war front. And she said, okay, if you're not going to let me cover the biggest story that there is, let me take a few days off and let me go on chutti, let me go on vacation. So I said, okay, fine. She had a cousin in the army, and she went by herself to the war front, to the Punjab border, and she started sending dispatches that the Hindustan Times then published. They were too good not to publish. And so was born the first woman war correspondent of India. And she did all this in a sari. I mean, I look at those photographs and I think, how? I mean, I can't even drape one today without tripping. But more seriously, my mother died when I was 13 years old, but these were the values that shaped me. Never take no for an answer, and never let other people's opinion of you shape who you are and who you want to be. As women, one thing's for sure, whether it's 1965, 1999, or 2024, we will have to fight 3 times as hard to get the same work. And then when we do it well, we'll be put under the microscope and be judged 10 times more harshly. But that's okay. We are who we are, and we need to be unapologetic. And we need to remember that for every woman who fights to open a door for herself, a few years later, many more women walk through that door without a fight.